Good morning and welcome to the third episode of the On Air Advocate podcast, where we look weekly to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. My name is Tammy Flynn, and I am your host, as well as the creator of this podcast. Super excited. Today we have an interviewee in the house. Miss Angela is here to share her inspiring journey with us about going from her career life to living a life with Graves' disease. And so I'd like to welcome her at this time.
Hello, Tammy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy that you said yes to this interview because I feel that your journey that you have been on over the last, I think we were talking about before the show, 5 years, definitely directly can impact so many lives. And so thank you for that. I know that whenever we talk about our own personal stories, it's not always an easy thing, but I thank you for being here. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? I know that I know you as a dear friend and a client of mine, but let our listeners know a little bit about your background yourself.
Well, I am almost 50 years old. I am married to a wonderful man. We have 2 grown sons and 2 grandsons, and we also have a couple dogs.
So a full house.
Yes.
Now, I guess getting right into learning about, the Graves' disease, tell us and kind of walk us through, the beginning of the journey. I know that from us talking about it over the last couple of years and me also seeing you during that time, you went from like full-time career woman out every day, got your makeup done, hair done, ready to take on the world, to developing Graves' disease. And so what were the signs, the signals? Were there any? I mean, how did it get discovered?
Well, there really wasn't a lot of signs. I started getting headaches behind my eyes, and I thought that was due to working on the computer a little too much and that I just needed to take a little bit of time off of work, just relax. And I also started losing weight at this time, but I wasn't trying to lose weight. It was just happening.
Okay.
It was right around the holidays, and my mother had pointed something out to me. She said that I had lost a lot of weight and that my eyes were not looking correctly. They looked like there was something wrong with them. And she actually told me I needed to go into the doctor to have my thyroid checked out. I made an appointment to see the doctor, and it wasn't for probably about a month. But during this time, because it was pointed out to me about the weight that I was losing and the appearance of my eyes, that I really started to take notice of it. And I didn't make that first appointment. I actually ended up going into urgent care because my eyes were bulging out of my head. They I don't know how else to describe it.
So, I mean, you had kind of started through this, the beginning part, just thinking, I work on the computer a lot, I stare at the computer, I get headaches, and just kind of relating it to that, no urgency, like I need to go. Then you started, your mother had kind of noted something, started to lose weight, a little bit of a different appearance in your eyes. And then was there a point where you noticed the difference in your eyes? Like, other people were telling you that they saw a difference, but what was that pivotal moment when you saw a difference and said, there really is something, and that was that the day that you were led to urgent care that you kind of went in?
No, I actually noticed, I think I noticed it when I was taking a selfie with a couple of my girlfriends at a fundraising event. And by that time, I had already made the appointment, so I was just going to wait until then. And then I was at a family member's house over the holidays, and I woke up the next morning. I thought my eyes were itchy and red due to their cat, but that wasn't it. So that following Monday, I went to urgent care. And before I even said anything to the physician's assistant, She said, I think there's something wrong with your thyroid, that you may have Graves' disease and Graves' eye disease. Okay. She sends me in for blood tests. Somebody's supposed to call me back the next morning. I actually got a call back from her, and she told me I did have Graves' disease and Graves' eye disease. And
at that moment, I know that we have talked about this before. You were like most people, what's Graves' disease?
I did not know, and I actually had to go onto the internet and check it out. It is hyperactive thyroid, which I really didn't know what the thyroid does for your body, but it does regulate everything. And there are a couple different diseases related to it. I have Graves' eye disease, which your immune system thinks there's something wrong with your eyes and it attacks your eyes.
Okay. And would you say on the spectrum, I know that we were talking about this before the interview, that there are so many variations of Graves' disease as well as spectrums as what is more rare, you know what I'm saying, than something that's more prevalent. So sometimes when people hear Graves, they think, you know, like of this portrait of this. And there's, you know, for so many diseases, there's different... You know, there's different calibers,
yes,
you know, of it. And so where would you say Graves' eye disease sits on that?
People that are diagnosed with Graves' disease, it's less than 10% will get the eye disease too, because it's actually two diseases.
Okay, so you have you have Graves just as an underlying, and then you also have
the Graves' eye disease.
Okay, so that's where the rarity comes in.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And everything the doctors had told me about is that it can be regulated. It can be regulated with synthroid, which is a thyroid hormone. So once your thyroid is regulated, then the eyes will go back to normal.
Okay, so you're thinking, okay, take a deep breath. I have this. I've now researched a little bit on it, and I know that I'm going to be able to fix it, and it's going to be okay.
Yes.
Right, and that's kind of where the journey began, right? That, I mean, at that 5 years ago, where you're just thinking, okay, there is a pill, there is a treatment, and I'm going to get through this. I'm super strong. You know, I have a wonderful husband, and it's going to be all okay.
Yes, especially since I do have a family history of hypothyroidism, which means that your thyroid is too slow. I just happen to be the opposite. I have hyperthyroidism, so mine just works too hard. But everybody in the family that has this takes medication, and they're all okay.
Okay, so you go in for your first treatment, or you went in for your first, you know, like got a prescription to start taking it. And so where did that kind of break come? Because obviously, as we're going through this journey, things didn't all go exactly the way you thought.
No. Pretty much from the beginning, it did not go as the way that I thought it would. My husband and I picked up my prescription. I started taking the prescription. You have to take it at a certain time, follow all the rules, don't eat, don't drink for an hour, take it at the same time every day. I was on this prescription for approximately 2 weeks, and I started getting a stomach ache. No big deal, didn't really think much of it. Like, okay, I'm under a lot of stress. It's just going to take time for my body to regulate itself. I was not the type of person that ever called into work. And within 3 days of the first stomach ache, I did call into work. My husband encouraged me to go back to the doctor. And when I did go to the doctor, before I could even say anything, she said, I do believe you are in liver toxicity due to your thyroid medication. I need to do some blood tests. And I'm left waiting there in the doctor's office. And
you're like, okay, I have Graves' disease, and now my liver's not functioning right.
Correct. Correct. She wanted to put me in the hospital. My husband happened to be out of town for work at this point. This is all within a matter of 3-4 weeks that I was just diagnosed with all this. She also told me I was in thyroid storm, which I had no idea what thyroid storm was. I just remember getting extremely upset, saying that I needed to talk to my husband and that I would call her next week and we would figure this out then, that I was too emotional to deal with it. So I left her office. By the time I got into the parking garage, my husband was on the phone and said that he was coming home. And at this point, I was so upset, it was hard for him to talk to me because I was crying. I was extremely emotional through all this, and I'm an emotional person, but not to this extent. By the time that I did get home and started doing research, thyroid storm means your body, your emotions, everything is totally out of control. To deal with thyroid storm, they need to go in and remove your thyroid immediately. So within, I want to say it was like 10 days, I had a doctor, I had an appointment to go into the hospital, and my thyroid was removed.
Okay, so here you find out, you go to the urgent care one day, you're getting these headaches, your eyes are kind of starting to protrude out of your head. You find out that you have one of the rarest form of Graves' disease, the eye disease and Graves' disease. Then a few weeks later, you're in liver toxicity, and then you find out you need to immediately have your thyroid removed.
Correct.
So I call that a hot mess. And so, all right. So you're kind of, I don't even know that you can come up for air at that point. I mean, to be honest, I mean, you're kind of just in the storm.
Correct.
Okay. So you get this doctor, you're now having surgery. What next?
I thought everything would be just fine after that. Once they remove your thyroid, it might take a couple of weeks, but again, you're given another thyroid replacement medicine, and I would be fine, and everything would go back to normal, including my eyes.
Okay, so now you're, I don't know how many weeks recovery kind of out from surgery now when you start to realize that even though you had the surgery and even though you're on all these medications, things are not getting better. So where was it at that point down the road? Was that, you've kind of recovered, you're now about 9 months or a year down the road and you're finding out, or when did that kind of break happen where you're like, okay, so I did this step and I did this step and this isn't better? Or do you feel like it was like constant, like you did that, whatever that next step was, and it just wasn't solving any problems?
I was diagnosed December 30th. Thyroid was removed January 26th. By the end of February, middle of February is when they told me that I needed to start getting intravenous steroid treatments,
okay,
to stop the progression of the thyroid eye disease. So by the end of February, I was going in once a week for 45 minutes to get steroids injected into me to stop the progression. That I had no time to breathe. There was no any time between this at all.
It was just this storm.
Yes.
That just kept on brewing with no answers.
Correct.
At this point. So you start those treatments. Then what's next? I know that from obviously knowing you in personal experience, in our friendship, that there was a lot of different doctors traveling to different clinics, Mayo clinics, etc., to try to find out answers. So when did that traveling process start? So, or what was that next thing after these treatments then?
Because the progression was worst case scenario, I ended up getting radiation. So all this was done within the first 10 months of being diagnosed.
So now you're getting radiation on your eyes.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the next year they were preparing me for orbital decompression, which is eye surgery for both eyes. I went, within 2 years, I had gone to the Mayo Clinic. I had 3 eye surgeries on each eye. So after the eye surgeries and all the different doctors' clinics, there was no resolve.
Okay, so you've now done all of this, and this has just been that first year, correct?
Well, the surgeries came in the second year.
Okay, so that was in year 2. But, one thing that we didn't touch base on, so, I mean, this storm that in this journey that you've taken on us already in just these last 2 years, as we talked about before, you were in a full-time, full-fledged career. So if you're having surgery after surgery, doctor after doctor, where were things at with your career then at that point?
My husband had encouraged me to quit work because it was hard for me, just various things, driving to work, double vision, the stress of the doctor's offices, the many, many doctor's visits, surgeries, and it did get to a point where I did have to quit.
So here you are going through all of this medical stuff, and so now you've left your career that you've worked at for 20 years?
22 years, yes.
Full time. So a complete, that in itself, aside from health issues, I mean, is a complete life changing, each and every day to be doing the same thing, and that to be removed, not only your health as well being compromised. So you leave your job. About how far into this, at this point, are we at like year 2 that you left your job, or after year 1?
After year 1.
After year 1.
It was
okay.
after year 1.
And so now, as your health became more compromised, and the surgeries and the steroids and the radiation and all of those things were not working, obviously you get to the point where you may need other outside help. And I know that we've touched base before on the different services and things that are available in our communities, for people who that go through these trials and tribulations and end up having these chronic health diseases, conditions, that they need aid and they need help. And I know that has been a crazy storm for you as well. So not only have you gone through the progression of test after test, after surgery, after radiation, there's no resolve to that. You've now walked away from your career and now also trying to seek a little bit of outside help, through our community supports. And what was that journey like for you? And, how long did that take you to get any type of resolve?
It all started with me sharing with friends who cared about me, who wanted to know what I was going through. It was through their suggestions that I started to look into Social Security. I started to look into programs for visually impaired. I learned to be my own advocate with my doctors, with various clinics. And it was really because I was talking with friends about this journey that helped me along.
How long would you say of a process for some of those state, supports that we have? Would you say that process was for you before you actually obtained it? Because I know if there are listeners that are out there that are hearing this podcast today, I want to be the first to tell them, and I hope that you can second this, that when we are applying for different things through different funding sources and help through our communities and state supports, sometimes that doesn't succeed the first time. And so to try again, you will eventually succeed, but it takes repetitiveness. Did you find that in your journey that it took, an ample amount of time before you got some of the aid that you were looking for?
Oh, most definitely. Social Security is, you could do a whole podcast on just Social Security. That took a couple years. The service for the visually impaired, I do tend to get quite a bit of information. I just need to ask the right questions. They don't always help you along, say this is what we offer, but you have to learn to navigate those systems yourself.
And I think that goes back to, obviously, off of this podcast, me and you talking about the reinforcements of learning to do a lot of that self-advocacy, because no one else is going to be a better advocate for you than you. And where I talk about, within is why this podcast was created, is going beyond the brochure. We are all given all these brochures and different texts that we look at on different websites and really looking at that, sometimes it doesn't all translate into making a whole lot of sense for the questions we should ask, because obviously this is your first journey with this. You haven't done this your whole life. This wasn't your career in having Graves' disease. And so I always encourage people to, be gentle with yourselves in the sense that this is a new beginning. This is learning something completely new, and to keep on going. And so now I do, we can conclude that you are receiving some services now.
Yes.
And you were telling me today that actually you just learned of a new service that you can get for your computer.
Yes, since it's difficult for me to work on the computer, I don't read books anymore. So I go through the Library of Congress and I get books and magazines on tape. But they also have this, if I want to communicate with people, send emails. I really don't look at my emails very often. But now let's say I want to start a journal instead of just writing in a journal. I can actually plug this program into my computer and talk to it, and the computer prints it all out for me. So all I have to do is talk, or it'll read stuff to me. So I don't have to use my eyes so much. But we're already 5 years into this journey, and I'm just first hearing of this.
Right.
service.
So, just learning. And so that's where the hope is too, is possibly some things and tools that you've learned about over that 5 years. Maybe someone who has just found out that they have Graves. These are good tools, to note. And I definitely, any of those resources that about, we will be adding to the podcast, to some of the links so people can directly, go to them as well for that. So, we're going to back up a little bit. Obviously, we have gone through the journey. We've gone through 2 years and kind of talking about services, but now we're 5 years out. And so the conclusion of trying different medications, going through different procedures, all of that, am I safe to say that this is your new normal?
It is my new normal. It's not always the normal that I want because there are still ups and downs, but I do have friends like yourself that when I am feeling down or when I need to look for resources or encouragement, that I have that support group around me.
And over the last 3, because, we're talking about, we kind of went through those 2 years, but over those last 3 years, is there anything that you've discovered medically or within therapies, types of different eye massage, different things that you would say over the last 3 years have not solved and cured the disease in any way, but have aided and made it a little bit better. So, if there are listeners out there that have gone through something similar, maybe they haven't tried this yet.
One of my greatest sources of comfort and I don't know how to say, it just really made me look at things differently. We are talking about my eyes, but it did make me look at things differently as I had my regular eye doctor suggest vision therapy, which people are like, what's vision therapy? Actually, your muscles are an eye. So I went through almost a year of vision therapy. Not only did they teach me about how my eyes work, how to train my eye muscles, when to relax, when to take a break, ice my eyes, the encouragement that I found from the people there really helped.
Okay, so and definitely you're able to give me whatever source that was that you use so that we can add this into this podcast.
Oh, most definitely.
As well. So aside from the vision therapy, in kind of wrapping up, you're 5 years out now with this. As we've spoke about, there's some good days and some bad days. But the biggest thing is, to remember that we're in it for the long run. And it's okay to say this is my new normal, and to embrace that at what it is and continuing to grow, and to learn. I know that me and you on a personal level talked about, with you having one of the rarest forms of Graves' disease, looking for those support groups, and looking for a way to kind of channel that, because as well as I feel with my own son who has some of the rarest forms of things, you want to have that network to chat with, the supportiveness of you guys sharing on a regular basis. I mean, I know there's like the Graves Association. What is that about?
It's Graves' Disease Foundation. They actually advocate. So Graves' disease is not the same for everybody. Some people, all they have to do is take medication. Some people are the worst case scenario, which I happen to be. Some people will not go into remission. But they have different resources. They have a letter out there that is to your husband or from your husband, from your spouse, that really puts everything into perspective. They work with various doctors around the country. They just try to bring in more information about different types of medicines, different things.
Okay, and I know that in our community, obviously we live in the state of Wisconsin. Is there any actual Graves support groups here in Wisconsin?
Yeah. The closest one is in Chicago, Illinois, which, of course, that's kind of a journey, especially
if you have Graves' eye disease.
And you can't drive at night, so you don't want to go down there. There are some support groups online that you can find, but again, you have to be careful with some of those. Some of them, it's just, and I understand it, some of them is just people complaining, different things, and that's not what you need all the time. I know you need to vent, but you need those encouragement.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, I'm so sorry, but I know that for a while you were trying to start something here in the Wisconsin, Milwaukee, area. And what was your journey kind of like with that?
The bottom line came down to this. There's not enough people with Graves and Graves' eye disease to warrant a support group. Like some of your major medical complexes, they have cancer support groups or grieving support groups or mental health support groups, which is great. But because my disease is not common, there wasn't one that I fit into.
And with you having said that, I hope that this podcast is being listened to by some of those individuals, because I think that even if in a large format you are not able to start a support group, just the unity of being able to bring together those others in the United States that have the rarest form of Graves like you do, I think would be not only beneficial, impactful, empowering, inspiring, and medically, just for you guys to have the knowledge to bounce off of each other. Have I tried this? Have you tried that? I think that would be amazing. So I hope that in the next 5 years, that, through doing different things like this, you are able to bring that together.
Thank you so much. It means a lot.
You know that I am so grateful and thankful that you took the time, the bravery to share your story and your journey with all of our listeners. In addition to that, you are truly an inspiration. You have been on this roller coaster for over, going on 5 years plus now. And I commend you. And I, as your friend, am extremely proud of you. And I know that within time, in the Graves world, you will create great change for so many as well.
Thank you for believing in me and saying those kind words. I just want to say never give up. Keep looking. keep reaching out. You never know where those answers will come from.
With that, and now that we are both in tears, I want to thank you guys for listening to episode 3. I will add all of the links to any of the resources right to this podcast. Thank you again for listening. Thank you again, Angela, for being here.
Thank you.
And we will see you guys next week.